Hello everybody, welcome back to another managed training session. Today we're going to be running through the owner and the tenants as users and if they can interchange being an owner and both a tenant, or a tenant and an owner, or even so a tenant across a tenancy for multiple leases in the managed system. So what I'm going to start with is if a tenant can also be an owner in the system, or an owner can also be a tenant. The easy answer is yes, a owner can be a tenant through the managed system. Hypothetically, if I was an owner who had an investment property through a real estate agency that used managed, but I was also a tenant at another property that also used managed as their software provider, I can be a owner and a tenant across both. There is no reason I cannot. The only thing is that I cannot share the same email. So if I am an owner, my email address is linked to my owner profile, my owner payments, my owner statements, everything regarding my ownership, and anything regarding a user itself comes down to your email and it being linked to that. If I was a tenant at another property, I would have to have a separate email for that tenancy profile. So my owner profile and my tenancy profile cannot interchange, just in regards to how our payments are structured through managed and the process of those payments. Therefore, in order for me to accommodate the fact that I am an owner and also a tenant that uses the software managed, I would have to have two separate emails. Now, from a property manager's point of view, how would you understand and know if that is the case? If you were to just take a owner's email or a tenant's email that is an owner and add them to a property. So if I was to add them to a property, you would get an error code just looking something like this. So with that error code, it is going to identify the fact that this user role cannot be taken, and you would have to ask the owner or ask the tenant, whichever way they are, to have a separate email created for either their owner profile or for their tenant profile. Now, coming to the world of tenants, and if a tenant can be or have a tenancy across multiple properties, is that the case? Yes or no? The case is yes. Although the key factor that you have to take into consideration as a property manager working on this behalf is that they are going to share the same tenancy wallet. So taking this profile, for example, this is a tenant. If I scroll further down below, I can see that this tenant is linked to two separate leases. So they might personally rent a property and then they might also rent another property as a business account. So yes, one email for a tenant can be linked across two tenancies or two rental properties via like leasing, but keeping in mind that they share the same wallet. And what that means is they just have to be mindful of the fact that when their rent is due or when bills are due for each property, and making sure that they're making those payments on time. What that means is, say for example, this tenant here has rent due at Gabby Street on a Friday and it was for $5,000, right? But they had a water bill due at 132 Arthur Street on the Wednesday for $500. They didn't realize that they had that water bill due for Arthur Street, but they knew that they had the rent for Gabby. So Gabby's house. So they just pay the rent for Gabby's house, which is due on Friday. That money for the rent due on Friday is going to be taken and paid for the bill due on the Wednesday for Arthur Street. So this wallet, when you have multiple tenancies, acts as pretty much a shared bank account, you would say. And pretty much anything gets paid into that wallet is shared between both leases, but you have to take into consideration as well that whatever payments are due first, the system is going to take that money from the wallet and allocate it to whatever is due first, even if it's split across the multiple properties. So that conversation in terms of how to navigate that with the tenant is just sort of letting the tenant know how the system functions, pretty much just what I described right now. and then how they're going to navigate that. So just letting them know, okay, your rent for each of these properties are due on this day for this amount and this day for this amount for the other one. You need to make sure that you're paying your rent on time for those separate properties, because if you have payments being made, they're going to just get interchanged via that wallet money. So just sort of letting them know that that is the case, and how the system works is that they need to make sure that they're making the payments on time for both properties when the bills are required or when rent is required. At any point, if payments get delayed because they, paid the rent for one property and it went to the bill of another property, that's just, again, a further conversation letting them know that payments are due by their due date. And the system is going to make the payments by their due date. That's just how the process of payments works. And for them to sort of, I paid this bill and it's gone to my rent, or I paid this rent, it's gone to the bill. Well, unfortunately, at the end of the day, the bill was due on a certain day or time, or the rent is due how it is due. We cannot change that. The only other thing that they could do to avoid sharing one wallet across two properties is pretty much like we just said with the owner, create a separate email. So they might need to create a separate email just to split up the payments being merged into one, and having two separate payment IDs or payment wallets that they would need to manage the payment to. So that is a bit of a run through on sort of users' experience through Manage and how to navigate tenants having joint tenancies or multiple tenancies, or a tenant and an owner being a owner and a tenant, or how that process works. So hopefully that gives a bit of insight in navigating that. Any further support that you need regarding that, you can always ask our support chat.